Brought to you by the United States Marine Corps.
Hello everyone and welcome into the SCPI Southern Section Weekly Laxcast. I'm Sarah Chafee and alongside me is our lead analyst Jim Loftus from Lax. And Jim, we're closing in on week 3, heading into week 4, so we're going to talk about things. There's tons of movement in our weekly rankings, so we're going to go there first and kind of sum up week 3 and then look ahead to week 4 and give out some game balls for outstanding performances. But let's go where we usually go. Boys top 10 for week 3. As I mentioned, lots of movement. So we'll start with number 10. We have San Clemente, 9 Oaks Christian, 8 Chaminade, 7 Westlake, 6 Harvard Westlake, 5 Tesoro, 4 Palos Verdes, 3 Loyola, 2 St. Margaret's Episcopal, and number 1 still Foothill. So we have a few teams first, Jim, that are on the bubble. Santa Margarita and CDM. Talk a little bit about why those teams didn't make it in. Were the other teams in the top 10 just too good this week?
Yeah, I mean, Santa Margarita lost this week to Palos Verdes, which is number 4. It's only their second loss, but there's a lot of really good teams in the top 10, so they just kind of got squeezed out. And Corona Del Mar, it seems really odd to see them not in the top 10 because I believe there probably will be a top 10 team when all is said and done. But looking at body of work here and as we enter week 4, they're 3-3. But so we had to push them out for a little bit. And that's the interesting thing about doing this weekly ranking that includes both OC teams and LA teams is trying to compare them and where do they slot in with each other. It's one thing to do an LA ranking or an OC ranking. When you try to slot them in together, you run out of space really quickly. And there's some teams that just sort of earned their way in. Westlake, I think we had them in at number 10 last week, but they keep winning and they are scoring a ton of goals. So really felt like we had to move them up a little bit. And San Clemente, which was out of the poll last week because they'd only played one game at that point. They played 2 more. They won them both, so they're 3-0. Really based on momentum, they earned that number 10 spot ahead of Santa Margarita and Corona Del Mar.
I did see one of CDM's, one of their games, extremely physical game. Have you had a chance to see CDM play yet, Jim?
I haven't. I haven't gotten down to the Orange County area at all. I'm seeing mostly games up here in LA, right. And in fact, I even missed Saturday's game where St. Margaret's beat Loyola, which if that's those two teams flip-flopped in our rankings here, 2 and 3 to 3 and 2. After St. Margaret's handled Loyola, I think it was 8-4 was that score. So hopefully I'll get a chance to see some of the more of the OC teams before too long.
And speaking of Corona Del Mar, Foothill beat them. They're still holding it down at our number 1 spot. What makes them so good right now, Jim?
I think depth and experience. I don't think they graduated a whole lot off of last year's team that won the OC title and then lost to Loyola in the section title game. So I think they've been there before, and I think they just have a lot of talent. This is going to be, I think, a trying week for them, if I'm correct. Well, maybe not. We'll get to games to watch later, but they do have a tough schedule coming up. So we'll see how long they can remain undefeated.
Okay, so let's shift now to our girls' top 10. We'll pull that graphic up, and at number 10, you see we have Chaminade, 9 Los Alamitos, 8 San Clemente, 7 Santa Margarita, 6 Palos Verdes, 5 Aliso Niguel, 4 Redondo Union, 3 Foothill, 2 St. Margaret's, and holding it down still at our number 1 spot, we have Mater Dei. So Same type of thing. We have movement, Jim. Trabuco Hills had a tough week. They dropped out. They lost to Santa Margarita and a big loss to St. Margaret's, and then same with Newport Harbor. They lost to Tesoro in overtime. So those are the two that dropped out. We also have other movement. Tell me what you see in this top 10 and kind of what changed after week 3.
Well, it was an interesting week on the girls' side. Because some of these teams started playing each other and thus beating or losing to each other. So Mater Dei actually suffered 2 losses, but they were both down in San Diego to La Costa Canyon and Torrey Pines. It's kind of excusable. So no one in the southern section has beaten them yet. So that's how we left them at number 1. Foothill lost to San Clemente, which is why you see San Clemente enter the rankings down there at number 8. So remains to be seen, if Foothill's still way above San Clemente, and that easily can change. But it's why it's getting interesting. Palos Verdes from up in this area was unranked, but they had a really good week. They beat Westlake from up here. So in the latest coaches poll in the LA area, Palos Verdes is now number 2, Westlake number 5. So that was a solid win for Palos Verdes last week. And then they went on the road and beat Santa Margarita, which had been our number 5 team. So when these teams start beating each other, you have to start trying to figure out, are they truly better and deserving of a higher ranking, or was that one game an anomaly? Did one of the teams have, injuries or absences or something? So it's a little bit jumbled. Elise Niguel moved up 1 spot to 5. We slotted in PV there at 6. Santa Margarita slides a bit so they can slot in behind PV after that loss. San Clemente enters the ranking after beating Foothill and Tesoro. Los Alamitos lost to Mater Dei, excusable, but then beat Oak Park, a pretty solid team from up here in the LA area, and then lost to Aliso Niguel, which we have at 5. So it's really hard to punish Los Al too much, losing to 2 ranked teams. And then Chaminade is hanging in there in the number 10 spot. They won. There's a tournament up here called the Birmingham Lax Bash, hosted by Birmingham High School. They play full-length games, 25-minute running clock halves with timeouts. So the games actually do count in standings. And Chaminade won the gold bracket, the highest bracket there, winning 3 games in a row. So they have a big week ahead of them, playing Redondo Union, which is still in our rankings here at number 4. And then also playing, who is there? Oh, they also play Oak Park, which is number 4 in the LA Coaches Bowl. So Chaminade has a big week ahead, but they're coming off a pretty solid week themselves. Maybe
they can capitalize on that momentum. I was at that Santa Margarita Beckman game, and Santa Margarita, they have a stud in Caitlin Murphy. She's only a junior. She scored the game-winning goal in the last few seconds. She's taking her talents to San Diego State next year. Or, I'm sorry, not next year because she's only a junior, so in the future. Good game, though. But Santa Margarita started kind of slow, and then they just went full throttle. So that was an interesting game to be at. And then, side note, I know we're Southern Section, but, man, those Torrey Pines and La Costa Canyon teams, my goodness. I've seen some of those girls. It seems like a good handful of the Torrey Pines roster, they're committed to go play somewhere.
Yeah, and I think it holds true on both the boys' side and the girls' side. As we've talked about before, I've been following high school lacrosse out here for 8 years or so, since shortly after moving back from the East Coast. And what was explained to me is that when lacrosse came to Southern California, it came first to San Diego, then moved north, and Orange County teams adopted it. And now, in the last few years, it's moved pretty heavily into the LA area, and then there's more LA teams now that can compete in Orange County or San Diego than there were just even 5 years ago. Right. And so I think when you see Mater Dei, the top team in the southern section, go down to San Diego and lose to La Costa Canyon and Torrey Pines, it's a factor of the game having advanced a little bit further down there.
A little bit more established.
Girls playing it earlier and more of them.
Right.
Because lacrosse is a sport that at the highest levels, you need 10 players on the field who all know what they're doing and have skill, as opposed to at a lower level, maybe you can get by with just 2, 3, 4 players who know what they're doing, and the rest are athletes who support them.
Right. Speaking of players who know what they're doing, let's shift our attention now to game balls. Let's start with boys' game balls. These go to outstanding performances from players across the southern section. So let's hit them, Jim.
Yeah, we had a few down in Orange County. Josh Fox from Foothill had a solid week, scored 10 goals and had 4 assists in 3 games. The biggest was probably 5 goals and an assist against Corona Del Mar in a victory there. We also have Joe Fuller from Newport Harbor. He scored 5 goals in a comeback overtime win over Beckman. The interesting part of that is he scored 3 of them in a row in the fourth quarter or late in the game to tie it and force the overtime. And then he had an assist on the game-winning goal in overtime.
Oh, my goodness.
Further north in the LA area, a couple guys worth mention. Michael Nagy is a freshman attackman at Palos Verdes, which is number 2 in the LA area, and where are they? Number 4 in our rankings. He's a starting attackman. He had 2 goals and 2 assists in a victory over Harvard Westlake, also highly ranked, and then came back with 4 goals on Friday when they beat Santa Margarita. Not bad for a freshman.
Not bad at all for a freshman.
And then, we've talked about Westlake. They made their entry into our rankings a week ago, and they moved up a little bit this week. They're number 3 now in the LA coaches poll. And you wonder how they're doing it. Well, Duke Cohen, the senior attackman, is one reason. He had 10 goals and 9 assists in 2 games last week. Now, you can look at the competition and say, well, maybe, he's not doing it against the elite teams, but the kid can put the ball in the net. He can generate some offense.
Absolutely. Wow. So congratulations to Josh Fox, Joe Fuller, Michael Nagy, and Duke Cohen. You guys all receive game balls for this week number 3. Let's head to the girls' side, Jim.
Again, we came up with 4 names, girls who put up some impressive numbers. One thing we're going to have to do is figure out how to get some defensive players and goalies in here. We don't always get the numbers to justify that.
But coaches, report your numbers.
Offensively, there's some kids putting up some impressive numbers. So we'll start with Tesoro and freshman Paris Melberg. Scored 10 goals this week in 3 games, including 5 against Corona Del Mar. So good for her. Foothill sophomore Ashley Stokes is another one. 2 goals and 2 assists against San Clemente, and then 6 goals and an assist against Redondo Union. That's her third 6-goal game of the season.
And Redondo Union's top ranked as well.
They are. They're so that's pretty impressive.
Right.
Then up here, we mentioned Chaminade earlier. In that Birmingham tournament, they played 3 games. Kate Mackle, who is going to go play, she's a senior, going to go play at Elon University next year. 12 goals and 14 assists in that tournament in 3 games. So she's responsible for 26 goals in 3 games.
Oh my gosh.
Including 4 goals and 3 assists in the title game against the hosts, Birmingham. And then the last one to mention is San Clemente senior Shay Heft, who had 2 goals and 2 assists in that win over Foothill that we mentioned a little bit ago, and then another 2 goals in the win over Tesoro. So good week for a couple of girls in the southern section.
Absolutely. Congratulations to Paris Melberg, Ashley Stokes, Kate Mackle, and Shay Heft. They all receive game balls as well for week number 3. So now We've gone over week number 3. Let's shift our attention to looking forward now to week number 4, checking out some of the matchups. And I know that I think schools, Jim, are starting to be in spring break, I think. So I don't know. Does that impact some of the games?
It does. In some cases, there's going to be teams that just take a week or even 2 off. I think Westlake, we mentioned, has a couple games this week, but then doesn't play again until April. But what you also see during spring break is teams from out of the area coming to Southern California, where hopefully the weather is nicer. Although we have had some rain.
They're probably disappointed.
We've played some games in the rain and covered some games in the rain.
Yes.
But so you do see some interesting matchups, and we've got a couple of those this week as well. We're also starting to get into league play in some cases, so we may not have the more compelling, intersectional type matchups or non-league matchups. Not as many of them, but there's still a few. On the boys' side, we're looking at tonight. Tuesday night. This will publish on Wednesday, so you'll be reading about these games hopefully. Los Alamitos is at Corona Del Mar on the boys' side, so we'll see if CDM can get something going. And Oaks Christian, which is number 6 in the current LA coaches poll, is at Loyola, number 1 in the LA coaches poll. So that's a pretty solid matchup. Wednesday, St. Margaret's in Santa Margarita. That's going to be a good one. A pretty compelling league game up in the LA area in the Mission League. Chaminade is at Harvard Westlake. So those are 2 ranked teams there. Thursday, an interesting one. Neither one is in the SCPI poll ranking here, but Servite of Anaheim travels out to Santiago.
Okay.
And both are top 20 teams in Orange County. So that's interesting to see if one of them can begin to creep up a little bit and eventually maybe crack the SCPI top 10. Friday, we get one of those cross-county or sectional games where Palos Verdes goes down to play La Costa Canyon. So that's going to be a really good one.
Oh, buckle up.
Yeah. And here's where you get an out-of-state team coming in. Faith Lutheran from Las Vegas, which won the Nevada State Championship either last year or the year before. I'm not exactly sure, but they're one of the top programs in the state of Nevada. They come out here for a couple of games, and they didn't take it easy for their little out-of-town trip. Friday, Faith Lutheran plays at St. Margaret's. Then hopefully they'll get some rest because they got to get up Saturday morning and play at Foothill. So that's a pretty good back-to-back for Faith Lutheran.
What a weekend for them. Oof.
Right. And then we got another league game here Friday night. Number 7, Agora, number 7 in the LA coaches poll at number 4 Westlake. And this will be a good test for Westlake to see if they really deserve the climb up the polls that we've seen.
Yep.
So, there's some interesting boys games, perhaps not the marquee games necessarily that we saw last week, but there's still some games worth getting out to see.
A chance to shake up the rankings as usual.
Sure.
And let's head to the girls' side. What are some, if someone wants to get out and watch some girls lacrosse, where would you send them?
Well, unfortunately, a couple of the better games are today, Tuesday. So we're telling you about
Sorry, guys.
In the podcast that publishes Wednesday, but they've already happened. So
we're letting you know that we're very aware that they're happening, but we'll be talking about them next week, maybe.
Unless you can, jump in the DeLorean and go back 24 hours.
Yes. When you guys know how to do that, let me know.
Yeah. So anyway, the Tuesday games worth paying attention to are St. Margaret's at Mater Dei. So you've got our number 2 versus number 1 in the SCPI rankings playing each other.
I won't put you on the spot and ask who you think's going to win, Jim, but what's it going to take for St. Margaret's to top Mater Dei? You think it can be done?
I have desperately avoided making predictions in covering high school lacrosse.
Yes.
It's one thing to have a conversation and rank teams and say this one's number 1 and that one's number 2, but trying to figure out what a bunch of teenagers are going to do on any given afternoon.
That's a really great point.
I try to stay out of that business.
It's almost like March Madness. Any given day.
Sure.
Given day.
And they're 1 and 2 because we say they are, right. And they could easily be 2 and 1.
So it can be done. Mater Dei can be topped.
Absolutely. I would imagine so. I mean, they lost twice to San Diego teams. Can an Orange County team knock them off? We will see. So that's a good one. Redondo Union is coming up north to play Chaminade from Redondo Beach up to West Hills. So that's a good one in the LA area. And another interesting one happening Tuesday is Palos Verdes going down to play Foothill. So Foothill is coming off of that loss to San Clemente and a win over Redondo Union. Palos Verdes has just climbed up the rankings and after a really good week there. So that one could be interesting as well. Mm-hmm. We'll know more by the time this posts.
Love that.
Later on in the week, there's some interesting ones. Foothill is at Los Alamitos on Thursday. Santa Margarita is at Esperanza. Now, Esperanza's 8-0. The schedule hasn't been super tough for them, so this will be a good test.
Good test.
And if they win, then maybe they're legit. If they don't, then maybe it's an opportunity for Santa Margarita to regain some momentum after they slipped in losing to Palos Verdes. So
let's say hypothetically they were to win. Is that a team you could see sneaking into the rankings?
That's tough. I mean, looking at the other teams that dropped out this week of the girls' rankings, Trabuco Hills,
more of a resume,
and then comparing a 9-0 Esperanza to that, if they were to beat Santa Margarita, it's possible, but the overall resume and schedule strength might not quite get them in, but it would definitely be something we'd look at before next week's podcast.
Absolutely. Heading on to Friday, what do we got?
We've got Tesoro at St. Margaret's, and then Chaminade, its second big game of the week up here at Oak Park. That's a little bit of a rivalry in the area. Right now, Chaminade's number 3 in the coaches poll, Oak Park number 4, so that's a good matchup. And then Mater Dei, this is an interesting one, plays a team from Pennsylvania, another one of those cold weather schools making probably a spring break or winter break trip to get some warm weather. So don't know anything about them, but coming from Pennsylvania, there's making this kind of cross country trip. There's a decent chance that they're a decent team.
Right.
So we'll see how Mater Dei fares in that one.
So some teams have a bigger week than others, but certainly some opportunity to shake up the rankings, which I personally love. It's always fun to see some new teams in the rankings, so we will keep our eye on that. It's going to be a good week 4. We'll be back next Wednesday, as always, discussing all things week 4 and looking ahead to week 5. We'll have game balls for you, but for Jim Loftus and Sarah Chavey, that does it for our SCPI Southern Section Laxcast. And Jim, how can the people follow all things lacrosse, whether it's San Diego, LA, OC? There's one place they got to go. Where is it?
Well, you can find us on the web at maxlaxoc.com. If you go to maxlaxla.com, it'll redirect you to the LA section of the website. But MaxLaxOC is the primary destination. You can find us on social media, MaxLaxLA, MaxLaxINC, MaxLaxInc. We've got a couple of young guys working for us now, so we're getting out and about to more and more games. We're live streaming a couple games as well, so you might even be able to stay home and check them out instead of braving the cold and the rain.
Yes.
And watch them live on maxlaxoc.com.
All across, all the time. They're killing it over there. So thank you, Jim, again for all your knowledge. The people at home appreciate it. I appreciate it. The lacrosse community appreciates it. We'll see you next week.